This week, the forensic teams investigate the cases of two young women brutally murdered in Glasgow in one weekend, just a few miles apart.
I believe in Scotland we've been able to deliver a unique service.
To identify suspects is one thing, and then to prove people are guilty of a crime is something completely different.
Although you see a lot of dead people, you treat everyone as an individual with respect and with humanity.
Forensic scientists, they are silent witnesses, and they are the eyes and ears of law enforcement.
Young professional women, a lot to live for, brutally battered to death.
This is probably one of the most premeditated murders I've ever encountered.
We're into double figures of murders in a month, and everyone is picking up murders and working on murders.
But first, we return to a previous case.
And suspected by the modus operandi with Angelique Kluck, they had committed their crimes.
Security officers handle criminals and murderers daily, but they struggled to restrain contempt toward the man facing charges for the rape and murder of Angelica Kluck in September 2006. The body of the 23-year-old Polish student had been found wrapped in bin bags and dumped under the floorboards of a Glasgow church. But as the trial progressed, even more chilling discoveries were made.
It's the one and only time when the hairs have actually stood up in the back of my neck when I received a telephone call from the head of CID in Lothian and Borders Police to tell me that they had just discovered that Peter Tobin was living in Bathgate at the time of Vicky Hamilton's disappearance.
The missing 15-year-old was last seen in Bathgate town centre. When police discovered Tobin's connection to the town, their investigation grew. Veteran David Swindle, senior investigating officer on the Kluck case, already had his suspicions.
At the same time, I set up Operation Anagram because I suspected that Peter Tobin had committed other crimes. The conviction for the murder of Angelica Kluck was a significant milestone to the next stages of finding out what Tobin had done.
Tobin's former home in Bathgate became a crime scene. The occupants rehoused to allow a search. Serial killers keep trophies. In the loft, a dagger was found hidden behind a joist. Forensics found a tiny sliver of flesh on the blade, and Tobin was questioned.
Yeah, wait a minute. As I say, I've never met her. You know what I mean? I've never.
The challenge of matching someone as young as Vicky with the DNA from the flesh on the knife was impossible, even for forensics. But then a sharp investigator made a major breakthrough. Babies born in Scotland from 1962 have a screening test called the Guthrie sample. A pinprick of blood is taken from their heel. Vicky had had that test, and the vital DNA match was made.
It was a fantastic piece of detective work in forensic science, and that was a huge breakthrough because then the police really knew that they were getting close.
Then another cold case involving a missing person came to the attention of Operation Anagram. Dinah McNichol innocently hitched a lift on the way home from a music festival, also in 1991. Subsequently, an Essex police analyst discovered unusual withdrawals from her bank account in Margate. Living there at that time, Peter Tobin. That prompted police to issue a search warrant. On the 14th of November 2007, the first gruesome discovery was made. Brazenly, Tobin had buried Vicky Hamilton's body in his garden at Irvine Drive, Margate.
It was important that we had proper communication and a single point of contact for forensic issues. And the single point of contact for SPSA was Carol Weston.
When Peter Tobin was convicted, initially we looked at all his items of property and we obtained some DNA profiles which I held and ultimately loaded onto a database for missing persons which collates all the genetic information about people who are missing. Then as the forces started looking into their missing persons, any DNA profiles they had of interest, they could send to me.
Some aspects of the case were familiar to investigators on the Klook murder.
So she was wrapped in 5 bin bags, very much like a Chinese doll, and some fantastic work done by fingerprint officers of Lothian Borders Police who were able to identify from bin bags which had been in the ground for many years 4 fingerprints which matched that of Peter Tobin.
2 days later, the skeleton of Dinah McNichol was uncovered, buried in the same shallow grave. Both bodies had to be formally identified through dental records. The forensic investigation began and toxicologists made a vital discovery.
In the cases of Dinah McNichol and Vicky Hamilton, we received samples from which we were able to detect the presence of a drug called amitriptyline. Amitriptyline is a central nervous system depressant. It's used for depression and for treating neuropathic pain. One of the side effects of amitriptyline is its sedative effect. Obviously, a decomposing body over that period of time, you'd expect very little of the blood or the tissues left, and we're reliant on those blood samples and tissue samples in order to extract the drugs. However, in both cases, we were able to recover material that hadn't fully decomposed, and from that, fortunately, we were able to detect the drug amitriptyline in them.
The forensic team began to re-examine preserved evidence. Vicky's purse, which had been discarded by Tobin and found in the centre of Edinburgh, had been held for 16 years.
We knew it was her purse because her bank cards were in it. There was some stuff that had been given by her sister. It could all be identified, so we knew it was Vicky Hamilton's purse. The scientists managed to get the profile from the metal clasp, but of course it wasn't a profile that matched Peter Tobin.
But Tobin had 2 sons. The younger of the 2 was staying with his father when Vicky Hamilton disappeared.
They contacted Peter Tobin's son and got a sample of blood and obtained a profile from it. And it matched the profile, the DNA profile from the metal clasp of Vicky Hamilton's purse. And the scientists were able to say that, in their opinion, the DNA profile came from saliva, and were able to say that that was consistent with Vicky Hamilton's purse having been given to the wee boy and he'd put it in his mouth, as youngsters sometimes do.
Tobin's fate had been sealed, and forensic staff began preparations for his 2nd and 3rd murder trials. The multimedia unit created graphics to show the positions of the 2 bodies buried in Tobin's garden, and also to sanitize grisly images for the jury. At Vicky Hamilton's trial, the DNA linked to her purse, the breakthrough with the Guthrie sample, and fingerprints on the body wrapping resulted in a 2nd guilty verdict.
Tonight, Peter Tobin is beginning a life sentence. He'll serve at least 30 years. It's very likely Peter Tobin will die in jail.
The 3rd guilty verdict was even more significant.
It's very easy for people to speculate and say that Tobin has done 20 murders, 40 murders, 100 murders. We know he's done 3. He's a serial killer.
Queen's Park and the south side of Glasgow is popular with the local community. Early that summer morning, news began to spread that a local woman had been found brutally murdered.
I was told there was a body being found in the park. At that point, I don't think they were actually sure if it was male or female. They just knew there was a body and that the body was partially clothed.
It was an absolutely brutal murder, a very sad case. A young professional woman, a lot to live for, just gone home after a night out with her partner and brutally battered to death.
A massive investigation immediately swung into action. The man in charge was Derek Robertson.
The initial aspects are we must lock down the crime scene, preserve all the evidence we can. So I had to make sure we had relied and trusted people in Queen's Park to guard the body and preserve any evidence that was there, and lock down any witnesses in the vicinity, and look for potential suspects that could still be in the area.
The crime scene at Queen's Park was 148 acres, one of the biggest ever in Scotland. But Derek Robertson was used to large-scale police investigations.
My policy decisions were shut the park gates. If anybody's in the park, record their details and make sure there's nothing suspicious about them. The perimeter of the park, I want all car registration numbers taken. I want a crime scene manager who is a specialist trained CID officer at the locus right where the body is to set parameters on guarding the body, barrier tapes, sufficient number of officers to guard it, photographers, forensic support. It's like getting the specialists moving.
So we went in the first cordon and walked along this path towards a grassy area. One side of the grassy area was a small privet hedge, and Moira's body was actually behind the hedge, so it wasn't apparent until you got up close to the body and looked over the hedge that you could see her lying there, and she was lying face down.
Our first job would be to photograph that, video it. It was fairly new at that time, was to do the 360 panoramas of the scene.
Working outside is challenging enough for forensics without unwanted attention from the media, who even chartered helicopters. A tent was erected to hide the body and protect evidence from prying eyes and telescopic lenses, allowing forensics to do their work.
Before we actually go anywhere near the body, the first thing you want to do is to recover any evidence away from the body. Ideally, you want to establish how the person has approached the body and left the body, because they're going to have left some sort of trace. We didn't know if Moira had been dragged through the hedge or thrown over the hedge. We didn't know if the person had gone into the hedged area. So the first thing we did was to search the hedge thoroughly. Because the vegetation's quite jaggy and rough, there's a chance people would catch their clothing on it, catch their hair on it, even cut themselves. So we wanted to recover any trace evidence first before it was disturbed. Because it was a recent body that hadn't been outside for very long, I felt very strongly that there would be a real high expectation of recovering DNA, at least foreign DNA from the body. So I wanted to make sure that we recovered what we could first, and then any other experts could work around that. She was partially clothed. She had on no lower clothing apart from a pair of socks. She was face down, and her upper clothing, although it was on, was all disturbed, and when we looked more closely at Moira, it was apparent that her upper clothing was actually quite badly torn and damaged. So as soon as I saw Moira's body in situ, saw the clothing torn off, I was pretty convinced it was going to be a sexually motivated murder. We couldn't see any obvious injuries until we actually got up close to Moira, and then we could see that there was blood in her hair. So it appeared from that point that there was a head injury. The pathologist doesn't want to disturb the body till all the DNA evidence has been removed. So with Moira, we recovered all our samples as she lay in situ, face down. We then turned her over, putting her into a clean body bag.
She had sustained really very severe and extensive bruising to her face, her neck. There was nothing to indicate that any weapon had been used. Rather, it was the type of bruising that you see when someone's been hit with fists, punches or kicks. She also had bruising on the backs of her arms and hands. Now, bruising in that area is typically sustained when someone tries to defend themselves against an assault. We call it defensive injuries. So that enables us to say that, at some point in the attack, she was able to defend herself.
There was signs of blood on the leaves that had been diluted by the rain, so the pattern of any blood had obviously been altered. So although we couldn't rule out she'd been assaulted there, we also couldn't say categorically that she had.
Now, what we didn't want is looking in hindsight 3 months down the line, I met Moira, we had sex and I left her in the park and somebody else must have killed her. So that's an easy get out. So we tried to work around about how do we disprove that.
We taped the damage to her clothing in situ. We swabbed her exposed parts of skin. We also noted white fluid on her pubic hair, which turned out to be seminal fluid. We made a decision very early on that Moira was not to be moved, her body was to stay in situ. and the pathologist removed the semen in situ.
When the semen was deposited in Moira, she never get back up. So the presumption is, because she was lying horizontally in the ground and been killed and the semen was deposited that way, she never get back to her feet again. So the person who carried out the indecent act murdered her.
Carol spent the whole day in the park collecting evidence. Now she had all she needed and could secure DNA profiles the next day. But crucially, she still needed samples from Moira's killer to get a match.
We knew that she'd left her boyfriend to go home and she never made it, but we found her car. So what happened between Moira parking her car and not making her flat?
Only yards from Moira's flat, police picked up a scattered trail of vital evidence.
She's parked the car, she's been walking back to her flat, something's happened to her, some struggle has taken place which has disrupted her bag, toiletries have fell out. So it opens up another area of house-to-house inquiry, CCTV inquiry. You're constantly growing all the time and moving the parameters with fresh information.
Fresh information did surface near Moira's flat. It was harrowing but vital, and from an unlikely source.
There's a bus route goes by there, so we have to get the CCTV off the buses, and we did yield information of a shape of a large male with a woman. It looks as if he was grabbing her and taking her across the road at the material time they thought she was taken. So we begin to piece the jigsaw together with these finds to say, parked car there, got attacked there, must have crossed the road because she's ended in the park, caught in CCTV of a bus passing by there. We get into the park and then we realise a witness who came forward to say, I saw something strange in a big giant holly bush next to the tennis courts. I just wasn't happy with it. We do a forensic search of that and we find blouse buttons. 6 blouse buttons, identical to Moira's blouse, who had no buttons. They've been tore off, they've not been cut off, because of the way the threads have been ruptured. And then look at her blouse and they say there's been real force used here. That really helps you to get a picture of what's going on. She had a shoe missing. Where was her shoe? How did we get her into the middle of Queen's Park, which is a fair distance from where she was taken? How did you control that person and get her way into the centre of the park, into the pitch black? She's a slight young woman. So somebody's got control of her, stunned her, done something to her, and then bodily took her and carried her or dragged her all the way into that park. It's a powerful looking person we're looking for. Is it somebody that knew her? Is it just a freak circumstance, wrong place, wrong time? Is it a stalker, an ex-boyfriend, somebody fixated with her, a chance meeting? We don't know.
Sadly, Moira's journey ended in the heart of the park. Her killer left her lying there and walked in the opposite direction. But he left a trail of scattered belongings stolen from Moira, and police traced his exit route.
We know the attacker stayed for a bit of time because he searched through all her property, looked at everything there is, took property off her, including Moira's mobile phones. Whether they were taken off her to steal it or to take it off so she can't call for assistance if they think she's still alive. But they've took her means of communication away. So we begin to get a picture of somebody coming in one way into a park, murdering Moira, and then coming back out another direction from the park. So your whole inquiries begin to move direction and begin to build a timeline picture. Who's leaving that park after midnight?
CCTV cameras in a church opposite the exit captured a ghostly image leaving the park at 2:17 in the morning. Only seconds later, he was picked up from another camera based at a nearby hotel, and it showed images of crucial interest to the case.
One of the images, you saw a large man, well built. He walked kind of casually in a particular way, and in the right hand you could see a square black rectangular object, and Moira's laptop had been taken from her. So we started following a CCTV pattern. Where's it going? We pick him up again round the corner, walking by a bus stop. No laptop this time. So between the first sighting coming out the park and the second sighting, a few minutes later, he's obviously put the laptop somewhere. Plus, there's a number of frames on CCTV that you see him walking by the bus stop and actually lifting his hand and looking at it and putting it down. He's obviously checking his hand, he's hurt himself doing it. He's got rid of the laptop, he stole some stuff, but where's he going? We've got an image of somebody we want to find. We don't know who it is.
Moira Jones's murder came during a month when there was an abnormally high level of violent crime in Glasgow. Police and forensics were stretched to bursting point. Then, it got even worse. Early in the morning, 2 days after Moira Jones was murdered, a dramatic 999 call was made.
I can't make out what you're saying. What's your name, ma'am? 14 seconds. Barry, what's your surname?
Ruthven Lane, I don't know why you got a stick.
Ruthven Lane. What's the problem?
Oh my God, oh my God.
What's the problem? You need to speak to me.
I think I've got a dead body here.
A lane in Glasgow's West End, full of restaurants and artisan boutiques, became a major crime scene.
Almost 200 police officers are now involved in 2 separate murder inquiries in Glasgow. Moira Jones was found in Queen's Park on Thursday and Eleni Pachu was found stabbed to death in a restaurant on Friday.
25-year-old Eleni from Athens in Greece came to Glasgow to begin a new life after her mother died. She got a job as assistant manageress at a popular West End pizzeria. Michael Young was one of the first from the forensic team to arrive at the murder scene.
As soon as we went into the restaurant, there's a large stairwell which takes you up to the seating area of the restaurant. You go into the restaurant, your left, that's the restaurant area, and then a bar, and behind the bar is the staff area. Near the safe area was the remains of Elena. She was lying there, a large pool of blood by her side.
In this case, the girl's clothing was all firmly in place, and we didn't think at the outset that it was a sexual assault.
But it was a gruesome sight that met crime scene manager Sandy McLean. A motive had to be established.
Was it a murder? Was it a robbery gone wrong? Was it a murder that was made to look like a robbery?
It was clear that robbery was involved. There were 2 safes on the premises. In the mezzanine area above the location where the body still lay, one of them was wide open.
The other safe wasn't. In fact, they tried to use that much force to get into that safe that they broke the handle on it.
The downstairs safe was covered in blood smears, and a possible scenario began to emerge.
We also noted that because the premises were very small, everywhere you went, you would be able to see Eleni's body. So clearly the perpetrator had killed the girl and then gone about raiding the premises and stepped over her. Could have looked down on the body from the upstairs safe. There was no getting away from the fact that there was a body there, and he systematically must have worked his way around this body to carry out the robbery.
The killer wore gloves to hide his prints. Smears of blood from gloved hands were found in the upstairs banister. But he made one serious mistake.
There were blood spots coming down both sides of the stairs, and the forensic specialists were able to tell us that most probably the person who committed the murder had injured himself.
Drop spots of blood finished at the exit to the restaurant. They couldn't have been Eleni's blood spots because she hadn't left the area.
The actual scene for Eleni's murder, although it was the restaurant, there was a much bigger area around the restaurant which had to be also classified as a crime scene, because that person, whoever murdered Eleni, had to get in there and back out again.
The size of the crime scene wasn't as daunting as Queen's Park, but the challenge of eliminating hundreds of suspects was.
It took us about a week to fingerprint that restaurant, in particular the stairwell, which is quite a big stairwell. So if you can imagine the amount of potential fingerprints you may have there with members of the public coming in, members of staff coming in. There's no quick way of doing it, and you could find anything up to 300-400 fingerprints, and they all have to be recorded or lifted.
Now that in itself is a challenge, because you've got people who are obviously in that restaurant for meals, you've got people who maybe work in the kitchen, so they're innocently, but obviously leaving their fingerprints behind. We had to look for that one gem, for that one fingerprint that identified the murderer.
The sheer scale of the elimination process was also a massive task for Pauline.
All of the DNA reference samples from anyone who worked at that restaurant and who may well be associated with that restaurant were analysed for comparison purposes.
Bloodstains around the body and on the banister belonged to the victim and the killer. But the blood found at the exit particularly interested Pauline.
The priority was to analyse the dropped spots of blood, because it was apparent that this was a single source of blood that may relate to the perpetrator. So that sample was analysed very quickly. Within the week, we had a match with a former colleague of Eleni's, Juan Carlos Crispin.
Spanish-born Crispin was a former employee at the restaurant. His identification was a massive breakthrough. He was arrested within days. But at Queen's Park, the team was still struggling for their breakthrough.
The break came when we extended house to house. We'd reviewed all the crimes, and a woman had been attacked some weeks previously. Weekday, late at night, male approached from behind, grabbed her, tried to choke her, steel bag. It was very similar, unsolved. So we took that inquiry, and it was a sexual crime as well. We took that inquiry and we ran it as a parallel crime. Maybe a stalker round about that area, and we were looking at that theory.
Those seemingly related crimes, carried out quite close to each other, finally gave the police door-to-door inquiry team a breakthrough. An address in Queen's Drive, near the east end of the park.
There was a house there that had been converted to bedsitters, which wasn't recorded. So you had a house which you would look at from the outside and think it was one house, but it was 6 bedsits within it. And our house-to-house teams went down to the bedsits.
The door was opened by a young Czech student, Lucy Pechlova. The police used their standard questionnaire designed to cover most inquiries.
Ask the right question, you get the right answer. How long have you lived here? Does anybody live with you? You can tell how many people stay here. Has anybody visited you recently? If so, who? Did they have a car? Did they come with anybody? Did they stay over? Did they stay elsewhere? One of the questions, she said, say, yes, a friend stayed for a few days and left. He's away now. And she said, well, when did they stay? And it was the couple of days before Moira was murdered, and he left the day after. Good detectives at the time realised this is important. This could be our ghost. Where is he now? Away back to Slovakia. What's his description? And then we realised from his description, from the CCTV we've got, and I went, this is too good to be true. We know what to do, bring her up here right now. We needed a translator. She could talk English, but we needed a translator to assist her. Very quickly, 30 minutes into it, we thought, we're onto something here. This looks really, really good. Slow it down, take our time.
The person Lucy was clearly describing was Slovakian national Marek Harčar.
He was not on record in this country, not in a database in this country, no fingerprints in this country. So he came into the country earlier and worked in Liverpool. And he came in as kind of cleaners and workers, and he worked a bit in Bolton. But he became disaffected with his working life down there and thought he'd make a brand new start in Glasgow. And he knew Lucy because she used to work in Liverpool when she first came to the country. But Lucy had made a life for herself in Glasgow. So he came up to stay with her, and she knew right away it was a mistake, that he's changed. He was drinking heavily, aggressive, violent, sexual, and she just wanted rid of him. And Lucy said for the period of time he stayed with her, he never went out at night, ever. He just drank all the time, watched his DVDs. The only one night he went out was the night Moira was killed.
Harčar had been drinking heavily that night. According to Lucy, he drank large quantities of vodka and lager. Then said he was going to look for a prostitute.
And he never get back to 3:30 in the morning, which puts him smack bang where we want him. And what Lucy said was, he's left half his stuff still in my flat. It's really annoying, including his mattress and things like that. So we called up the forensic teams, shut the flat down, it became another crime scene, and we meticulously went through all the stuff that he'd left in his flat. He'd bought a lot of porn tapes, porn DVDs, and she'd been away at work all day, and he was a friend to her, not a sexual friend, although he was trying it on, she was saying. But he'd stay in the house and he'd bought all these porn tapes. And we think very much meticulously, coldly, forensically into these things, and went, he's got a duvet, he's got porn tapes, there's every chance there's forensic material on this duvet.
So one of the scientists from the laboratory went out to this house and recovered sheets and things that this male had used.
Caro analysed sperm samples lifted from Harchar's duvet and sent it off, looking to match semen discovered at the murder scene.
I remember the night concerned, I was waiting for the match to come through to say absolutely millions to one, that's it, there is no mistakes, that's the person. And SIO doesn't rest until you get that phone call. And it was a Friday night, and I was sitting in the house with my wife, a bottle of wine, and you know they're running the profiles, and you're waiting for it, and you're waiting for it, and you're waiting for it. And it was Carol Weston I was waiting for the call with the forensic scientist. And she said she would phone me at 10 o'clock at night, and 10 o'clock passed, and it came to 11 o'clock. And you're texting back and forward going, where's my result?
I think I woke him up. It was about 1 in the morning, and woke him up and said, yeah, it matches your man, and this is who you're looking for.
And I'll never forget the feeling of, that's it, closed, dealt with.
And I can't say the words that he used, but he was very, very pleased.
And I texted about 6 or 7 people to say that's the result out, and they were all up waiting for it as well. And maybe the public don't get that aspect of the humanistic aspect of an investigator. Surely you're cold and meticulous to deal with it. You need to deal with the family empathetically, most definitely. You deal with bodies. We talk about bodies and murder victims. It's people and lives. Don't get me wrong, but forensic awareness and forensic recovery is the most important thing to say that person should not have died. And when you get that result, the euphoria at the end of all these long hours and hard hours, to walk into your murder team and say, that's it, you feel the air change, you know, and it's not like backslap, self-congratulatory, it's like it's been worth it, we've got there, and you feel good.
CCTV already showed Harchar fleeing the country. What he didn't know was that forensic scientists now had a positive DNA match linking him to Moira's murder. But the killer had a 2-week lead. By now, he could be anywhere in Europe. In the Eleni Paco case, forensics started to piece together the jigsaw of events that led to the murder. Part of a drinking straw had been found in one of her pockets. This tested positive by a drugs analyst as cocaine. A likely scenario began to emerge.
The plan was supposedly supply Eleni with drugs, and it looked like Juan Carlos Crispin attended that night to do that. He then placed drugs onto a meat slicer. Eleni was going to snort that, and then stabbed on the back of the neck. Just here, one perfect stab wound right through, I saw it down into her throat. He then continued stabbing her with a number of actions through her face. She had a number of stab wounds in her face, and as I say, she went down to the ground very, very quickly, and then he continued a ferocious attack on her, which resulted in 17 stab wounds to her abdomen, her neck and her face.
The evidence gathered. Trial proceedings against Crispin began. Then other sensational facts emerged. He had an accomplice. Marion Hinshelwood used to work with him at the restaurant, and she made the original 999 call.
When Marion Hinshelwood dialed 999 after finding Eleni's body, she was so hysterical that she could hardly tell the operator her name. But the cleaner already knew what she'd find inside before she opened these shutters. Her boyfriend Juan Crispin had told her what he'd done, and she'd supplied him with the knife.
The investigation team visited Marion Hinshelwood's flat. There they found a blood smear in the door entry buzzer and spots of blood inside the house. Quickly, information about the murder weapon emerged.
The knife was purchased by Marion Hinshelwood a number of days before the murder. And during the examination of the scene in a pool of blood, we found part of a handle of the knife. Now, it looked as though it was a 10-pence piece-sized part of the knife that would have broken off due to the force being used. In the control sample that we bought from the shop in which Marion Hinshelwood purchased the knife. It was a substantial knife, and it would have taken a lot of force to cause that to have broken the way it had. So it just gave an indication of the amount of force that was used by Crispin when he murdered Delaney.
Juan Carlos Crispin was already in a relationship with Marion Hinshelwood, but when the case went to court, she turned against him and gave evidence for the prosecution. She pleaded guilty to culpable homicide, but ironically, this decision shifted the spotlight onto her.
The defence lawyer questioned whether this was a crime that fitted with a robbery or with someone who'd been jilted by their lover. He put it to the jury, just think about the injuries that this girl suffered. Why would a person who was in this for a robbery need to stab someone 17 times?
But what shifted the spotlight back onto Crispin was his single big mistake.
Crispin was so caught up in the ferocity of the attack that he cut open his own hand. This injury was ultimately his undoing. His blood was found all over the inside of the restaurant, on the floor, on the banister, on the safe.
In a murder trial, the presence of DNA does not in itself guarantee a conviction. But in Crispin's case, forensic evidence against him was so overwhelming, it gave the prosecution a huge advantage.
Mr McConaughey said the case against Crispin was circumstantial, but compared the evidence to a jigsaw with enough pieces that when put together pointed to his guilt.
I'm sure that we would have eventually arrested him in relation to the murder of Delaney. However, I think with the forensic work done by Pauline and the rest of the team, it let us focus on him very, very quickly, and it did cut down the inquiry by probably a number of weeks.
Marion Hinshelwood pleaded guilty to culpable homicide and got 4.5 years. Juan Carlos Crispin was sentenced to a minimum of 22 years in jail. The judge, Lord Turnbull, told him, "What you did defies belief. You took her life in a torrent of blows."
I saw him getting found guilty, and I also saw the judge sentencing him. I thought justice was done. Whether justice was done in relation to Marion Hinshelwood's sentence, that's probably debatable.
Elaine's father had come over from Greece, and it was good to have it all concluded for his sake.
Such a clear case, for such a clear case. I couldn't be disappointed. Thank you very much. Once again, thank you.
She was a young woman, very full of life and with a good career ahead of her. The whole scenario was just very sad.
And again, we've got to remember this was for money, purely for money. There was no other motive for this murder.
It was almost 2 months since Moira Jones had been murdered. The manhunt for her suspected killer, Slovakian Marek Harčar, spread to Eastern Europe as forensic evidence mounted against him.
So everything was pointing in the right direction. We had the DNA matches, we had images, so we began to build a profile on Marek Harčar. He did have a record in Slovakia, but we wouldn't know that at the time. So we started to go through international liaison. Where is he now? Is he still in Slovakia? Is he moving about? Has he moved somewhere else? Has he joined another European country? Will he do it again?
It took challenging international negotiations and political skill to bring Harčar back once police knew exactly where he was.
We traced him. We done phone analysis and credit card, bank card analysis, and we realised he'd flew into the Czech Republic, crossed the border, he had spent some time in the north of the country and was now back in the south of the country. So we knew that, and we passed that information on to the Slovaks. Now, we didn't know what they were doing, and they never told us what they were doing, but we just told them, this is a murder suspect, we'll give you the intelligence package the way you want it, we'll confirm why we think it's Marek Harčar.
Harčar probably felt safe in his home village of Nalepkovo, Slovakia. But Strathclyde police were there waiting for him, with an international arrest warrant.
As soon as we got that European arrest warrant, that spade work that we carried out in advance of it paid dividends, because as soon as that warrant came through, and this is true, our investigators were over there, we said, that's the warrant live. It came through there, and it was about 40 minutes later, our investigators are leaving the building saying this will take days. and a guy in a moped pulled up and got off his moped and went, "That's him arrested." And they couldn't believe it. They phoned us and went, "That's him arrested." I went, "We've only just sent a warrant."
Harchar was drunk and didn't put up a fight. Inside the house he rented from a friend, Strathclyde detectives uncovered a mountain of evidence, even on Harchar himself.
He was arrested wearing the jacket he'd murdered her in, and inside his jacket had blood staining where he had been battering her to death up his arms. So there was forensic recovery from that as well.
He had kept property stolen from Moira, vital evidence that could have vanished under the Slovakian legal system.
And their prison service allows him to keep the property. So we had to do a kind of quick search of his person, take evidence off him and deal with it that way. And then we have to get him in an aeroplane from Slovakia back into Britain securely.
He landed in Glasgow about 7 o'clock in the morning, and we had to turn around his DNA reference sample, which is a swab taken from his mouth, for his court appearance at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which we did, and that meant that we could go to court and basically say the semen and the DNA recovered from Moira's body matched Marek Harchar, and that was enough to keep him in custody.
Finding the final piece of a scientific jigsaw is one thing, but explaining the whole complex picture to a jury is challenging.
For me, I know DNA. I know about alleles, I know how to prove it, but I'm an investigator. How do you prove that to a jury? And I know the work Carol carried out with the Crown on the prosecution about how to explain the DNA evidence was really important. Because you're talking to a jury, and the jury must understand, how do you say this colloquially? Do you get this? This is billions to one. It's got to be him.
We were able to take into consideration certain circumstances and actually interpret the profile by splitting the profile apart. The pink peaks here are Moira Jones' DNA types, and the blue peaks here are Marek Harchar's DNA types.
The old days of DNA, you needed a bucket of blood, you know, and it was 1 in 100. To the modern days, it's 1 billion to 1. DNA is a fabulous investigatory tool. Alone, it can't prove cases. You need other evidence to back up that. Fingerprints still remains a fabulous tool. You know, CCTV analysis and forensic aspects to that remains a fabulous tool. Vision is greater than the word. If the public sees somebody doing something, they go, "You're guilty."
CCTV played an invaluable role in the case against Harchar. The footage revealed his movements and helped recover personal belongings stolen from Moira that were of forensic importance. But Harchar was pleading not guilty.
Everything else was beginning to pile up against Marek Harchar. DNA evidence, witness statements, his conduct before and after the fleeing the scene, the buttons and the force used and the power of him, his jacket, the blood on the inside of it, having a camera belonging to Moira on his person. All these things were piling up.
During the trial, Marek Harchar's arrogance and general behaviour astonished police and forensic witnesses.
He did very little to try and cover up his crime. And while I was giving evidence, he was laughing, he was speaking through my evidence.
He sat smirking in the dock. There were headphones provided for him to allow proceedings to be translated from English into Slovakian. Sometimes he would throw them off, sometimes he just wouldn't wear them.
And it had to get to the point where the judge had to ask his solicitor to basically get him to be quiet because he was being so disruptive.
A couple of days were lost in court for a medical reason. I can tell you tonight the medical reason was simply this, that Marek Harchar was not allowed to smoke in court.
The graphic crime scene photographs also became an issue with Carmel.
I kind of felt quite strongly that I didn't think he should see those. But I just don't think anyone who commits that sort of crime has the right to see what they've done to their person, because if they must have got some satisfaction out of it in doing it in the first place. And he's obviously a particularly violent man, and he'd been violent to other women in the past. So I think you didn't want him to see those photos.
And more importantly, the judge didn't want Harchar to see the photographs, avoiding more torment for Moira's family.
I knew Moira's family were listening to my evidence, and it's hard knowing that they're listening to you explaining how their daughter's clothing's been ripped off. You're holding up ripped clothing for the jury to see. You're talking about someone effectively raping their daughter, and it's very hard to know that they have to listen to that. Yeah, a lot of pressure on you to do it respectfully. You want them to know that although you're doing a job and that you're speaking as a scientist, you're empathising with them and it's not just clinical and scientific.
Moira's parents had come up naturally for it, and we've been dealing with them, and I spoke to them on a number of occasions to break some bad news to them regarding Moira's death and what had happened to her, and you've got to be very honest with the parents. Right through to they realised we had a suspect, and I remember phoning them to say we've got a suspect. I remember phoning their parents to say we've got him. You know, and that's a lovely phone call to make. We've got the person responsible. It doesn't bring the daughter back. They'll never forget that. But they wanted some kind of closure.
Our precious girl had her life stolen from her in the most savage way by an evil, depraved monster. A monster without the guts to confess and who prolonged the agony of the trial.
I'll never forget watching that after the trial and saying, well, that's what it was for, to bring some kind of closure, to say your daughter shouldn't have died, but the person that killed her will never be free to do it again.
I think one of the lasting impressions is I met Moira's parents. They set up a charity in Moira's name to help relatives of murder victims. They wanted to thank us for the work that we did, which I found unbelievably humbling that they felt the need to do that. I just find them incredibly strong people, and I just wanted to reassure them that at every stage Moira had been treated with respect and with dignity, and we had done our absolute best. And obviously we hoped that they could find some sort of peace and some sort of closure from that.
Moira, darling Moira, we were so proud of you. We will always be so proud of you. And we will do the best we can with our lives to make them worthy of you. You will live with us forever. He had 13 previous offences, at least 4 of which were for violence. And I thought, someone's made a terrible mistake. I don't believe there's anyone in this country who would say, yes, let violent criminals in. It's as simple as that. I can't think of anyone, whatever political persuasion, would say, but we're for this. We want these people to be allowed to come in. Come on. We've got enough baddies of our own. It's as simple as that. If this happens again to another family, I said and I meant it, I think that will finish me off. I don't think I'll be able to go on. I still feel that. I'd like a law so that this doesn't happen to some other absolutely blameless, wonderful young lady.